Today, let's build a Copilot Studio autonomous agent to respond to my emails. Are you sick of responding to emails? I am too. So I'm going to show you the bot that I have built to respond to my emails and kind of show you how it's configured. And it can do a lot more than just respond to an email, right? It's going to forward stuff off, save data to SharePoint. So we're going to look at that agent. And then we're going to build your first Copilot Studio autonomous agent and explain to you kind of those mechanics so you can start to play with these same things. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is, you and me, right? We're Power Apps, Power Automate people. And that makes us uniquely qualified to be awesome at Copilot Studio. So as we're going through this, I'm going to show you some of the things that makes you go, oh, I know what that is. I understand how that works. And it speeds up the learning curve quite a bit for us. Sound fun? Then let's switch over to my desktop and take a look. Let's start the fun at copilotstudio.microsoft.com. And here we're going to first look at the agent that I've currently been building, playing, and using so you can get an idea of what's possible before we build that simpler one. So we'll click on agents over here. And as you can imagine, my agent, we can use the Buddy bot. You're going to notice theme here. I like my dogs. And if you're wondering, Buddy is sleeping like right there. I could throw something at him, but I won't. An autonomous agent is a little bit different than what you might hear of the declarative agent, right? Declarative agents are like chatbots, right? We write some rules, we kind of talk back and forth. The idea of an autonomous agent is it's going to run by itself. And so the way that happens, if we scroll down to the bottom, don't worry, we won't talk about all this, but we'll scroll down to the bottom, it runs from the trigger. Now here's one of those really cool things, right? Triggers are just flows. Yeah, you guys have written flows before, right? Just a simple Power Automate cloud flow that says, hey, every time Shane gets an email, then go ahead and send that information over to this bot so this bot can do its job. That's all it is, right? Like, we can go look at it real quick. Right? We'll just click these ellipses over here, say edit and Power Automate. It'll open us up a new browser tab. And seriously, because flow being is simple, right? When a new email arrives, now the one thing I did do, because I'm not quite ready to put this in production yet, I should, but I haven't. So I get emails from Chewy at powerapps911.com, right? That's my test account. So those are the only ones that trigger, right? Giving us a way to kind of crawl, walk, and then run before we just turn it on for the whole world. And then all it does is it says send a prompt to specify Copilot for processing and just sends the entire email, right? Everything came in over, right? So the who's it from, the subject, the body, all of that just gets sent into that bot. And then we tell the bot how to deal with it, right? But there you go. If you can write flows, and I know you can write this flow, then you know how to build triggers for an autonomous agent. All right, so switch back over to the agent. Okay, so if we kind of look here, so let's talk first about that, right? So we got the trigger. I guess I should stay down here. So the trigger, right? That's what says, hey, bot, wake up. And it passes in the data, it passes in the email. So then it needs to know like what to do. And so up here what we do is we have a bunch of instructions. And so make sure you check these out. Maybe I'll zoom in, do a good job of, pull myself in there. But what I want you to see here is that this lays out what the bot does, right? Read and understand the email. Generate an appropriate response based on the context of the email and send an email back to the sender as appropriate. Now, you notice here I have bolded send an email, right? Like this is one of those little patterns that we've kind of developed. I don't know where I stole it from. I probably stole it from somebody, but whatever. But so send an email. So what that's really saying is look down here under your actions, and there's an action called send an email. So it doesn't have to be bolded, but it helps Shane's brain realize that when I put that in bold, that I'm playing the match game down there, and I know that's where it's going to use the action, right? So that's where it's sending it back. When sending the email, send them as well-formed HTML. So this is one of those little things that you kind of figure out after a few times. It was sending real ugly plain text emails. I'm like, hey, just make it well-formed HTML. Boom. And you could provide it more like, hey, always send it in well-formed HTML with beautiful sparkles and rainbows or whatever makes you happy. All right, worry about your communication style. Don't respond to bad emails. Use a fun, casual tone with humor or dog puns as much as possible. Duh. Then down here, get a little more specific. If the email requests a meeting or a phone call, please forward an email to Jennifer at PowerApps911 and Shane, right? And if you look down here, forward an email. So once again, I just do that bold thing. So that way I'm very clear when I play in the matchy game. But so basically, if the email that comes in from Chewy says, hey, we need to have a meeting, then instead of responding with, yeah, we should have a meeting, it sends it off to me and Jennifer. So one of us can actually schedule and set up the meeting. So adding a little bit of smarts there, right? So we have the ability to forward the email. Then down here, we've got another one. If the email requests information about which training class they should take, then need help choosing a course knowledge and make a recommendation based on that, right? So if we look down here, I have knowledge, need help choosing a course. So this is just a Word document that has all the different Power Apps 911 training classes. Why aren't you taking one? And it explains what each one's about. So if Chewy sends me an email and says, hey, I want to learn everything there is to learn about Power Apps, Power Automate, I want to become awesome, amazing, right? Then it'll reply back with, hey, you should take Power Platform University, and here's a link to our 6-month program for that. That all comes, the document here has all the knowledge, And so up here, we're just saying, hey, we're just going to use that knowledge. And then once they've gotten the knowledge, then use our send an email action again and send it back to them, right? Tell them what it is. Please include a link to the chosen course in the email body, right? So in my first few tests, I was finding that yes, it was telling them what class to take, but it wasn't giving them the URL, even though the URL was in the knowledge document. So I just added a little instruction, right? And this is why if you've ever taken any of my AI classes, I'm always yelling you guys to practice your prompting. So I've spent thousands of hours prompting, asking Copilot, Copilot Chat and Bing Chat and ChatGPT, all of those different questions. And I've refined my prompting skills. So here when I was like, hey, it's not doing what I want, I bet I can just ask it to do what I want. Just like that. Now it has an email in there, no problem. And also because the email is an HTML format, the link is clickable. Like, how cool is that? And then finally, down here at the bottom, this is kind of my next frontier where I'm going with this next. It doesn't do it all today, but right? I wanted to say, hey, when you do this, when you're done, send an email to me and tell me what you did, right? Send me a summary email of what's going on, and then create an item in SharePoint. So it's going to use a different action down here for SharePoint create item, and it's going to add a brief summary of the action in the title field and a complete list of all the steps taken in the summary field. So that way I'm writing in my SharePoint list over and over again what's going on. My next goal, I haven't done it yet, my next goal is I'm going to build a different autonomous agent so that every day at 4:30, it wakes up and says, hey, go look at the SharePoint list, get all the items from today, and then send me one email with a summary of all the actions that this bot took, right? That kind of sounds cool. So instead of getting one email every time Chewy emails me, I'm going to just say, hey, put it on the SharePoint list, and then let's just kind of get a way to summarize that later. All right, but that I haven't done yet, right? That's kind of the next step. Hopefully this gives you an idea of, the power of an autonomous agent. Now we're going to build a simpler version of this in just a moment, but I wanted you to kind of see like what, with a little bit of refinement, right? And I didn't write this thing on my first try, right? This is a little bit of here, then I added a feature, then I added a feature, then I made the emails nicer, then I added the links. So I get this kind of one by step as I've learned and practiced in here. A couple other things, right? Make sure here, you notice I did turn on orchestration is enabled. So that's what it lets it do all this autonomous stuff. So you gotta got that on. And then down here, I did something you might not have expected, but allow AI to use its own general knowledge, and I disabled it. Why did I do that? So what is my knowledge about, right? It's help choosing a course, and they're my Power Apps 911 courses, right? They're the courses that I train. So what I found was that it wasn't shy about recommending other courses that it's seen on the internet before. It kept sending people links to Microsoft courses or even competitors. Ugh. So what I said was, hey, quit using your own knowledge, only use what I put here. And so that way it quits sending those links, right? Is it selfish of me? Probably, but let's be real. And so that's why they give us these levels of control. So there you go. So there is what this one does. So now, what do you say? We build ourselves a very simplified version of this. So to get started, we'll jump over here to create. Now with create, you can see here that we've got new agent, which we're about to use, or you've got some different kind of pre-built templated agents. I haven't really messed with these too much yet, but I think they give you ideas. You know me, I'm never very template kind of guy. I like to build so I know what's going on, right? But they're always good to get ideas. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna click on new agent. After a second or two, we're brought here to the create screen. And so here you're gonna see that they're gonna use a large language model to prompt us through the creation portion here. So very meta of them to kind of do that. And so really the first question is like, hey, what would you like to make? And so we're going to enter something like, please create me an agent to read and respond to my emails. Typically, I've done this a lot. And so I would normally write a much bigger, more complicated prompt, right? If I had more thoughts on what would go there, I'd probably go ahead and give it as much as I could going into it. But for your first time through here, like, we want to email one. So just give it the very basic core thing you want to do. And then we'll kind of let it suss out of us what we need. So let's hit enter. Now, if you look over on the right, now you can see that it's got all these different bullet points, right? The agent will read and respond to emails on behalf of the user. The agent should prioritize. The agent should summarize. Right? It's kind of saying, so what it's doing is it's using our prompts. It's taking the prompt and saying, okay, to make an agent that does those things, it should really have these characteristics. And so it's generating those characteristics over on the right. And we're going to see those get pulled through as instructions here in a minute. So we don't have to really worry about what's over there right now, but just keep in mind that that's why you're going to kind of see that populate. And that's why there's a little bit of thinking time there. I had to process my what should an email agent do? So now it's like, hey, what should the agent's name be? So we could just say yes to keep the name of email assistant, which is pretty good, but we're actually gonna say, please use video email assistant as a name. I just want to set a name that's a little bit more descriptive because I've got 3 email assistants already. So there you go. So set the name, and now it's like, all right, what should be emphasized or avoided in the agent's behavior? So this is where you might tell it things like, hey, don't respond to angry emails, or, make sure that you've always got a happy, positive tone. You could kind of drive the behavior. So let's give it a little simple instructions like, don't respond to angry emails or obvious spam or phishing emails, right? So it's trying to avoid the bad stuff. And the agent should always be very happy and casual. And so we're going to set enter there. It's going to create some new bullets. But, things like don't respond to angry emails, especially in the beginning when you're first playing with this, you want to kind of, make sure that if someone's irate with you, they're probably not going to be very forgiving if your bot sends them a response that they don't love. So, we want to make sure we're, trying to use this as best way as possible. Whole crawl, walk, run, right? So let's just crawl by always saying respond to happy emails. And as you'll see in a minute, even from specific people. Okay, next up here it asks us, do we have any publicly accessible URLs? So we saw in the last agent that I built, I added a Word document for knowledge. And so we know we can use documents for knowledge. We could use SharePoint sites, Dataverse tables, and a bunch of other connectors to pull in knowledge, all including public websites. The wizard right now really only works for public websites, and I don't have a public website that says, here's how to respond to Shane's emails. So we're just gonna say no. Okay, so it says, hey, I'm ready to be created. Do you wanna proceed to create the agent? And so we can either we could keep going, we could refine, we could have it change. Like we could continue this conversation, but for the sake of this argument, we're good. Also, sometimes it'll ask you like, hey, how was your experience? So it can kind of does like a little survey. I've only seen that happen once or twice, but thought that was kind of cool. So over here's what it's going to build. We're going to look at this in more detail in a second. Now, we also, you can see here, I could say create. We're going to do that in a moment. Skip to configure. So if you wanted to skip this whole wizard, you absolutely could have and started with a blank agent. I usually like to start with the wizard to get a little bit of a foundation. And then here, we've got things like restart the agent creation. Maybe you got in a weird hole where you're just like, hey, I just want to start over. Edit advanced settings. So if we want to jump straight into the meat, we're not going to do that, or just cancel. So anyway, a bunch of options. We're just going to press create. Okay, so it started to load here. Now notice when you first land, it still kind of says loading for, the description and the instructions. So let's give it another few seconds, right? Wait until all that kind of populates before we start making changes. All right, so that's about 15 seconds. Notice my edit button's clickable here. So now I feel like everything is in good shape. So speaking of this first section here, so you can see we got a name, our name, we get our description, what it does, and then we have the instructions. And so it turned into bullet points, kind of things we said, right? So the agent will read and respond to emails, all right? The agent should prioritize urgent emails. Let's hit edit. Let's kind of fix these up a little bit. So the agent should prioritize urgent emails. Like it's just going to get one email at a time. It doesn't need to prioritize. So that's an extra instruction. So let's delete that. Agents use a professional and courteous tone. We're probably going to change that. Summarize the content emails before responding. The agent, I don't want to do that either, right? I don't want to send back an email like you wrote an email about this. Here's what I'm saying. Like, no, thank you. The agent should ask for clarification. Email content is unclear. Maybe, but we're not going to do that. Well, the agent should mark emails read after responding. I don't think it can really do that. We'll leave that instruction there. See what happens. I've never seen that instruction before. The agent should notify the user of any emails that require their personal attention. All right, I like that. The agent should not respond to angry emails or obvious spam or phishing emails. Great. Should always be happy and in a casual tone, right? So notice here we got 2 different tone pieces. They kind of, contradict each other. So we're going to delete out this one. I'm going to here just add a little bit, All right, so how about the agent should use humor, including puns, dad jokes, and even dog jokes as possible. So I've had pretty good luck with that in the past. Now, also remember I pointed out earlier that like, hey, we as Power Platform people are uniquely, situated to take advantage of Copilot Studio. See this little FX up here? Insert Power FX expression. What? Yeah. So all that time you spent in Power Apps writing ifs and concats and, date and time functions, all of that work, right? In this case, we don't need to do it, but if we needed to, we have the ability to use Power FX, right? The same exact language from Power Apps right here in Copilot Studio. Pretty cool. Okay, so we're not gonna do that today, but I want you to kind of remember that we're in a cool place here, right? So let's go ahead and hit save. And after a second, your request completed successfully. Perfect. That's the instructions, right? And we're gonna refine those more. Like you're gonna find yourself kind of coming back to instructions over and over again. But so here, we wanna also make sure orchestration. So this is what allows it to use generative AI, right? The large language model to make decisions on how to behave, to follow all these instructions. So we need to turn this on. It'll be disabled. We wanna turn it on. This is also what's going to let it take advantage of all the actions and such that we're about to take to build out. Okay, so make sure you click that one. I usually forget and I have to come back and turn it back on. I didn't forget today. Yay! Hey, are you watching this and thinking, man, I'm probably a little behind on this whole Copilot thing? You probably are. That's okay. Remember, I've got some different options that help you. So if you go to training.powerapps911.com, we've got a free Copilot class. I'll put the link to that down in the video's description. We've got a paid Copilot one-day jumpstart class. So the free one's like a 1 hour thing. The free or the paid one's an all-day immersive, a whole bunch of the different pieces of Copilot that you need to learn. We've also got an on-demand class available. So lots of training options to help you guys get up to speed with this whole AI thing. All right, back to the video. So let's scroll down a little bit. So the first thing that makes this thing an autonomous agent, and all autonomous means is that it's triggered by some type of source, right? So we have declarative agents where people open up a chatbot, usually like in Teams, and then start chatting, and that's kind of how the conversation kicks off. This one we want to kick off automatically. So what we're going to do is we're going to click add a trigger. When you add a trigger, we've got, if we say all, like there's 51 different triggers that we could take advantage of here. We've got a whole library of things we could add. We got the featured ones. And so we're going to take advantage of these because let's start easy. And look, when a new email arrives, well, if you read all of these real quick, what do you notice? These are all Power Automate triggers. All a trigger really is the Power Automate cloud flow. So when we click this, it's going to be a wizard that helps us build a cloud flow that gets triggered. And then the first action is start this Copilot Studio session so it can do things, right? Your autonomous agent can take over. So just like in Power Apps, right? It's saying, hey, I got to make sure that you've authenticated these before. And so I have. If you hadn't, it would have asked you to sign in. So no big deal there. And so we're going to say next. And then look, all the same, if you'd added this act or this trigger over in Flow, all the same fields, just a slightly different looking interface. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to take advantage of the from portion of the trigger. And so the idea here is that I only want this flow to trigger if we get an email from Chewy at powerapps911.com, right? Chewy the dog. And so the idea, remember, crawl, walk, run. This way I can just go over there, generate these emails, and then, see how they happen and react and start to test. So I'm doing live testing, but I'm not just letting it open up to my whole mailbox who I might be getting stuff from customers, important people, You just never know what fancy person's going to email me. I don't want my bot responding to them quite yet. Very soon, though. The other thing I've thought about doing here, instead of just making it from Chewy, is you could say, you know what, I don't have a fake Chewy account. I don't know why you all don't have accounts for your dog, but you don't. You could do the subject filter. So maybe you just change the a filter here and say, hey, only respond to emails where the filter is Buddy is the bee's knees, right? Or Buddy is napping. He's sleeping on the chair over there. He just woke up from 12 hours of sleeping. Now he's right back to napping. Using this to control who the email comes from. Then finally at the bottom here, additional instructions to the agent when it invokes by this trigger. So the action that you'll see in the flow is going to be to trigger the Copilot that we're building. And then it's just going to use the content from body, which will be the entire email. So the to, the subject, the from, the body, like everything from the email that triggered it will be sent over. So then that way we can make decisions off of it. So we don't really need to know all that. We could have just said create trigger, but it's important, right, that we start thinking, all right, how am I using my Power Automate knowledge I already have? Because it's really just a flow. And we're just kind of filling in the blanks. So we'll say create trigger. All right, now that might have taken close to 30 seconds. I don't want you guys to freak out if it takes a long time on yours. So I just want to try to kind of give you ideas how long it takes for me. But it says hey, you should probably test this thing. So we'll say close. Now in reality, we're not ready to test the trigger yet because while we have our trigger, we don't really have any way to do anything, right? Like we told this thing to respond to the email, but we haven't given it a way to send an email yet. So now what we need to do is we need to go down here to actions. And so we're going to say add an action. Hey, guess what these are again? These Power Apps and Power Automate actions. Yeah, they are, right? So if we go here, we're just going to search for Office 365 Outlook. You've probably seen all of these once or twice in your life. And if you scroll down here, you probably have seen send an email V2 and you've probably used it 100 times. So we're going to click on that. What's going to happen here, right, is it knows how to use that connector. So it knows about its inputs and its outputs. We're going to configure a little bit of that, but then the action is just going to be taken based on that orchestration, that generative AI portion, that it'll decide when to use it and how to use it. So there you go. It's making sure I can authenticate. I already can. So we'll say next. So now it's like, all right, I'm going to set the name to send an email V2. You know what? We're going to copy that. And the description. Okay, so for our entire IT careers, we have ignored descriptions, right? Like, yeah, who cares, right? Did you know every SharePoint field when you create it wants a description? You probably did. You probably never did one. We need to start using descriptions, and agents, they are super important. This is how the generative AI knows how to and when to use this action. So you can see this operation sends an email message. Very simple, but you might sometimes need to get in there, right? You don't want to get too elaborate, probably 1 or 2 sentences, but you need to tell the agent, because the agent's going to decide to run this on its own based on what's in this description. So that'll work, but I could be a little more clear. I could say something like, the agent can use this action to respond to emails or notify the agent creator, right? Like, you want to be very clear, very concise. This is what it's used for. And we know that this lines up with the language in my instructions, right? Because instructions say to respond to emails and to notify the agent. So we're really trying to connect the dots here without literally connecting the dots. Now for authentication, most of the time when you're building a declarative bot, you're going to be like, hey, I want the user authentication. So if Chewy opens up a chat session, right, then everything that happens in that chat session should be happening using Chewy's account, all the actions. In this case, right, Chewy's not opening it up. A flow's causing this thing to trigger, so we don't even know that Chewy sent the email from the standpoint of authentication. So in autonomous agents here, we're going to often use Copilot author authentication, or probably always, right? I always struggle to say always yet, but every time I can think of. Because we want me, right? The guy who's making this, right? This is my autonomous agent reading my emails and responding as my emails, responding for me. I want it to run as me. So that's what we're setting up here. Now down here, you've got inputs and outputs. This has changed in the last 2 weeks. So typically I have not had much luck using the inputs and outputs, like configuring them from this wizard. So I'm going to show you where I go to look at them. So we're going to ignore them for now, but definitely would be worth you trying out, using these, seeing if they get the same behaviors. And then the same thing for responding. So for responses, right, in this case, like we don't need a response to this because the agent's autonomous. It's in order to respond to it, be responding to itself. So we're not worried about that. But once again, kind of when we're doing those declarative agents, we often do need to set responses. We want to be like, yes, your item was successfully created. Yes, I sent that Teams message for you. We're going to leave all this alone and just say add action. Okay, your action was added to the agent. So now we've got instructions, we got triggers, we got actions. I think we're ready to try this thing out, right? So I want to make sure I hit publish up here. So then that way all these pieces kind of get put into place. And so it's actually ready to run. Now this might take 30 seconds to a minute, just depending on its mood, but that's okay. We'll wait. All right. So it says published. So let's jump over to Chewy's mailbox real quick and write an email. Okay. So the green bar, right, that is Chewy's mailbox. You can kind of see it up here. So we're going to say send an email to Shane. We're going to set the subject to be Happy Thursday because I'm super creative. And then for the body, we're going to use something like, yo, Shane. That's right. Yo, yo, yo. It's really hard being a lazy dog. Can we take a nap after you finish making that video? Chewy. All right. So Chewy's going to send us this message. So we're going to hit send. And now what will happen, right, is it should go from his outbox to my inbox. And then the flow should get triggered because my inbox has been, had a new email. It'll see it's from Chewy. And then it will trigger the agent. Now, if we look over here at the flow real quick, since we're talking about it. So this was a flow that automatically got created for us. And if we open this up, you can see it's already succeeded. And so if we look here, it really was as simple as I said. There was a action for when a new email arrives. And then there's a send a prompt to specify Copilot for processing. Like that's literally all the flow was. Okay. Now, while I was doing that, I heard the beep that told me that Chewy got an email. So let's see what Chewy got from me. Or that happy Tuesday. Hey, Chewy, I totally get it. Being a lazy dog is rough. I love it. Let's definitely take a nap after the video. Maybe you can dream about chasing squirrels. Cheers, Shane. That's kind of cool. Obviously that's not super business useful, but it can do business scenarios, right? It can respond to better, more, complex things. But right now we're really just after, hey, can we mechanically get this thing to work? Now, so if we switch back over here, so seeing that email, right, there's a couple of things I think about. So let's hit edit here. And so one is that the email was just one straight line of text, right? You want the email to be a little bit nicer. So we're going to do something like the email body should always be written in well-formatted HTML. Please make it look polished. So that is, a way to just get that email body to be a little bit nicer, especially if you start trying to include tables. I think you saw on the other one, like I wanted to do hyperlinks. I told it, hey, make sure that all the links are clickable. And it knew then to write the whole anchor tag, HTML and put that in the body. So it did a good job. The other thing that I would do differently here, in this case, like we just gave it instructions and it kind of figured out everything. Especially as I've started making ones that have multiple and more pieces, I have to be a little more descriptive. So up here, I'm like, hey, the agent will read and respond to emails on behalf of the user. And then I will go in here and say, using the action, send an email v2, right? Because we know that's the name. And then I will highlight send an email v2 and hit Control B. Okay. Now remember, I don't have to do this. You saw it work just fine without it. I'm not even saying this is the right way to do it. This is just how I'm doing it today, because now when I come in here, I can very quickly see that, hey, send an email v2 is getting triggered here, right? Like it helps me visually connect the dots, and the one we showed in the opening demo, right? I had all those different actions and I just wanted ways to kind of quickly be able to glance and fix it. Things like the email body, like this, this is just part of the instructions. This is just like things that need to be done. But this, I want to know that action is going there, right? So like this, the agent should notify the user of emails that require the personal attention. And then I would probably also say, I would just copy the same thing and throw this down here. So then that way I know that if it tries to do that, that it'll know to use that. And we saw we made the description. Like I am trying to just be as overly descriptive. I don't leave anything up to chance at this point. So, will that evolve? Is someone on the product team probably cringing right now that I'm trying to, get you guys to be more prescriptive? Maybe, because it's not the vision for how this works long-term. But today we're learning, we're trying to connect dots. It makes it easier to connect the dots for me. All right, so let's go up here and save that. Now, just a couple other things, right? We're going to call this video done in just a moment, but hopefully this gives you that foundation to start getting going, right? Because you saw the instructions that I did in the more complicated one. We're not going to re-replicate all those, but things like, hey, if they ask for a meeting, then forward the email to Jennifer. And so what did I do? I went down to actions and I added an action for forwarding an email. And then, another one, I had it log into SharePoint. So I add an action for create SharePoint. Those are all going to be videos we're going to make in the future where we get into adding actions and talk about kind of the mechanics there. But today, I just want this autonomous agent working. The other thing that I found super helpful when I was troubleshooting is if you go up here and click on activity, right? There's a lot more up here to learn, but here's the one we just did. So we can click in. And so if you look, you can click on these actions and you can see like exactly what it did. Okay, so that can be helpful. Hidden up here under the activity map is also the transcript. And so in the transcript, I don't know why it's showing up funky right now, but what I was seeing, like one of the agents where I was having a hard time, I could see the email come in and I could see it say, hey, I don't know how to deal with that, right? I could kind of see it getting upset. So the transcript and the activity map, these are ways for you to kind of better visualize these. The other thing that we want to do, one last thing, if we go back here to overview. So we made some changes up here. We want to make sure this didn't break anything, right? Fail fast, test often, right? We added this as well. So what we can do now, instead of going over to my Chewy's email box and saying, hey, let's generate another email, what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to triggers, and there's a little test beaker. So if you click on test trigger, this is going to show all the runs that have happened before, all the triggers, right? So just like over in Flow, we kind of have the same interface. Did I tell you guys you had an advantage? So here, if we say, hey, I want to start testing, then it's just going to pass that in. So I don't have to go to Chewy's email box and send that same email. It's just going to get that same email in the door, and then it's going to go through it, and you can see that it's writing a response. Look, you see the HTML code in there, so you know it honored that part of my request. And I just heard the button over here. And so if I click on that, so look, this time, we've got line breaks, we got little emojis, or yeah, I think those are emojis, whatever those things are, right? So we have that. So that will be working. Now, sometimes in these tests, you can see that it's kind of stuck in processing. I don't know why that happens, but we don't care. It's done what we wanted. Well, look, it's like it never happened. Oh, what? Hit the little reset there. It's gone, okay? So don't be afraid to do that. Like it'll figure itself out eventually. Other ideas here, one of the versions I did for this, I added instructions that said, hey, always sign the email as from Shane's bot. I also then wrote a whole, I wrote a whole footer and just gave it the HTML for that. It's like, hey, here's your footer. And it returned a link to my training classes. Yeah, take my training classes and some other things. So that's everything I've got for today. Hopefully this gets you going on autonomous agents. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below. Ideas of other videos you want to see, right? Like Copilot Studio is so important as we go in here into 2025. I'm going to be making a lot more of this content. So please give me ideas of things you want to see. scenarios you want me to go down, like bots and things like that. I think there's a lot to be learned this year. Okay, and with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day.